Hello everyone! Welcome to a week where the news is so slow the Ukraine war has been pushed in the background because some black on black violence happened on TV. Oh, wow. So because of that I've decided to instead cover this video. A video that can't particularly decide on what title it should use. The latest one on YouTube right now is You've Been Watching All Wrong Fight Club. Which, to be fair, is a lot better than the title according to IMDb, which I think was the original title, Fight Club, Cultural Fascism and the Colonisation of Victimhood, which sounds like a parody. So I gave the video a watch last night because I'm quite a fan of Fight Club, and after having been on Proper Horror Show's horror stream last night, I thought, well yeah, I could go with listening to some film analysis rather than giving it. Link for that video in the description, by the way. We were discussing aliens. So anyway, after an hour of putting myself through this agony, I thought, why not make a reply to it, because this is one of the worst videos I've ever seen. So with all that covered, let's get right into this analysis.
I want to tell you a story about a really cool friend that I have. This person dresses really slick, always says the right thing, dates the hottest people. My friend can win in any fight. And guess what? That person is me! That's basically the argument of Fight Club.
I mean, it's quite a bit more complicated than that, but if this is the basis of your analysis, you've really missed the point of Fight Club. Man, this is a really bad take, and we're 10 seconds into the video. Oh, and in case you hadn't already worked it out, yes, this 22-year-old film is going to be spoiled quite a lot in this.
One guy telling us about how cool someone is, then revealing that actually that guy is me. How come when we watch a movie that makes that argument, it's compelling? But if someone did that to you in person, you'd think they're a garbage person.
Well, believe it or not, you can actually really engage with garbage protagonists. They tend to be called anti-heroes, and yeah, there's quite a lot of films that have anti-heroes in and are very compelling. A huge example of this is all of Clint Eastwood's nameless cowboys in the Dollar Trilogy. The point is that we can see that these people have huge flaws, and actually in Tyler Durden's case, he is nothing but flaws, really. But he's making criticisms that really compel us, and that's the point. Tyler Durden's more of a warning than anything. This is what men will become in this society, where it's basically all based around consumerism. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. There's an hour of this video. Don't worry, I'm going to cut quite a lot of it out. I just don't want to get ahead of myself.
The standard reading of Fight Club is that Jack is schizophrenic, that he invents Tyler as an alternate personality out of either boredom or a sense of inferiority.
So yeah, problem already. Just to be clear, I'm going to call the narrator. She calls him Jack because he refers to himself as Jack in the book and at parts of the film. But yes, he doesn't have schizophrenia, he has split personality disorder, which is brought on by his insomnia, and through his desire to cure it by visiting all the help groups that he goes to, and basically seeing all these weak and pathetic men, he creates a split personality, which is Tyler Durden, who is created by the narrator's subconscious desire to essentially be a lot more masculine, and be more fulfilled with his life. The film tells you this, and I don't know how Maggie missed all this. She's giving this plot summary as if she only watched the film once, but she talks later and says how she watched the film more than once, so I have no idea how she's confused this.
And then the Tyler personality takes over Jack's mind for a while, does a bunch of terrorist stuff, but eventually Jack saves the day. Even though society seems like it's about to crumble, the bad man is sent away. It's a happy ending, right?
No, not at all. The narrator here isn't a hero. This isn't a classic hero's journey arc. No, the idea of the end here is that the narrators realise that Tyler Durden is nothing but toxic, given that, yes, he is a terrorist. So the narrator wants that part of him completely cut out of himself, while still integrating the parts of it that are actually useful. Since clearly he was unfulfilled before, but he wants to be fulfilled after. And it's way too late to stop Project Mayhem, and there's no epilogue to this film, so you really have to interpret this ending with very little to go off after. And given he holds Marla's hand while they watch all the buildings get destroyed at the end, with all the debt being erased, I take that as he looked into the abyss, he took on his shadow, which was Tyler Durden, the worst parts of him. He realised he does need to integrate the parts that fulfilled him there, but not go as far as terrorism anymore, basically. Because he was happy with Marla. He did like Marla, but Tyler was obviously treating her pretty terribly, whereas the narrator just basically wants to help her and be with her. So it's not that he saves the day moment, it is he has realised what he needs to do to have a fulfilling life and not get himself in a situation where he's causing terrorism again.
But I would like to propose a different reading. That this is a story told by Tyler from the very beginning.
Yeah, so this is why I wanted to go through this video, because she has completely taken the wrong reading of this. Because the IMDb description just absolutely nails it. All it says is, someone missed the point and made a 57-minute video. Yeah, that's pretty much how I'd sum this up, but I really want to get into detail of how badly they missed the point.
That the personality of Jack never existed within the fictional world. Tyler is real. Jack is a character invented by Tyler to manipulate us, the audience.
You can't just take the main plot and twist of Fight Club and then try and invert it. That doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's not explained throughout the film how Tyler developed this split personality. The whole point of the first half hour before we actually meet Tyler Durden is exploring the narrator, showing why he feels so unfulfilled, why the only happiness he can find in life is looking through an IKEA catalogue. And yet he feels so unfulfilled that he starts developing insomnia, and then when he tries to cure that, it ends up not actually curing the insomnia, but releasing a deep subconscious desire to find fulfillment in his basic masculine instincts. I mean, having gone through this before, I know what's coming, but man, if you've not seen this video before, just wait for this reading.
Talking about a fictional character within a fictional story can be a bit confusing, so we need to go over some concepts first.
I don't know, a lot of people seem to get Fight Club, and that is exactly what is happening in Fight Club. And I don't even know if that's true. There are plenty of stories where stories are told within the fiction. Lord of the Rings books, for example, have a shed load of songs and poems that are describing the world and stories from different parts and different ages of Middle-earth. I mean, for God's sake, the parables of the Bible are based on this. The parables are fictional stories created by Jesus to make a point. I don't know what it is, this line's really annoyed me. I think it's really insulting to the audience to say, look, I know that fiction's a really complicated thing, but imagine if we had fiction in fiction, when it's in pretty much every story I can think of. So I'm skipping a whole section where she spends about 5 minutes explaining how to watch a film, basically. Where, while our rational mind knows that this is just pixels on screen and speakers, and basically this is just a virtual being, yet even though we believe it's real but at the same time know it's not real, this means we are disavowing our own thoughts. And then she gets into this section.
The process of disavowal has been described by the formula, I know, but all the same. We know the movie we are watching is not real. But in order to enjoy a movie, we must believe on some level that it is real.
I mean, it's an interesting point to go through, but I don't see what this has to do with Fight Club. I don't know why in this Fight Club analysis, and, you know, the original title was about cultural fascism and colonisation of victimhood. I don't know why this needs to be part of an analysis for Fight Club. I don't know why this shouldn't just be a film on its own, because I don't think Fight Club is particularly unique in this. I think what Fight Club does uniquely is the unreliable narrator. But for some reason, Maggie here seems to think that I need to talk about how to watch every single film and read every single book, and I don't know why.
By starting with, I know, we seem to acknowledge something or someone's point of view. Then by adding the but, we disavow what we just claimed to know is true. When a politician says, let's not make this political, they are disavowing the fact that everything is inherently political.
Yeah, I really hate that line. Just bear in mind this is from 2018. Where the need for every leftist to say, oh, everything's inherently political was at its peak. I think she just put that in there to signal, hey guys, I'm on your side. Even though the statement is completely wrong, not everything is inherently political, and I mean that's just a subject for another video. I just find it weird to put things like this in this analysis of Fight Club. I don't think Fight Club does anything uniquely with anything she said so far, and this is supposed to be the analysis. This is supposed to be the, oh, this is how you're supposed to read it section.
It's already weird that we're able to follow the average film, following characters from scene to scene across time and space. In Fight Club, Tyler and Jack are a weird, extremely literal manifestation of absence, presence, and disavowal.
So just for reference, because I cut that bit out, the idea of absence, presence is basically when she was describing how to watch a film. It's the idea that we are both absent but present in the film at the same time, which is where she moved on to disavowal. I.e., when we are watching a film and believe it to be true, we are present in the film, but at the same time, we know that the film isn't real, so we are also absent from it. It's just media theory crap that, to be honest, it feels like she got a degree and felt like she needed to use it. And it's just taking away from the analysis for me. I think she could get to her points quicker. I don't think we needed to go into detail on those 2 points, but here we are.
By the end of the movie, Tyler was popping in and out of existence, even within a single shot. The way characters pop in and out of existence when we change from one scene to another in any movie.
I hope you see what I mean by I don't think we need this explanation. I don't see what this is adding to the analysis. I don't see what you're saying here.
By pushing absence, presence, and disavowal into the foreground, Fincher keeps our minds so busy we forget exactly what it is we're even disavowing. Hint, it's terrorism.
Yeah, see, I just don't think that's true. I don't think anyone forgets that terrorism is bad watching Fight Club.
And let me pause to say, film theory and psychoanalytic concepts like these are not inherently good or inherently bad. Personally, I'm glad I can enjoy a movie through disavowal. Even a fictional narrative can reveal deeper truths about the human condition.
See, she's doing it again. She just keeps bringing up media theory. And it's something that I really, really hate. Whenever I'm talking about fracking or geology or anything like that, I don't bring it up. I just tell you the information. And I'm just coming to the conclusion that if any sort of idea ends with the word theory, then it's not a real theory and it's just a whole load of waffle. Whereas if you have theory of something, then it's actually meaningful and means something. So, for example, Einstein's theory of relativity. That is a concept in physics that time and space are relative to everything else, and there is no point where we can base everything around to measure it from. Whereas if you think of critical race theory, then, well, I think we all know that that's a whole load of nonsense. Thank you, James Lindsay, for pointing all that out.
What we need to ask is, what are the effects of a particular film's use of these concepts? And are the implications of the narrative true?
See, this is why I think it's just insulting to the audience. I just assume that everyone knows this. I assume you know how to watch and think about a film. And in fact, I think she's actually misunderstood absence presence when she's talking about Tyler Durden disappearing and reappearing in different places, and she compares that to different scenes in films. And the reason I don't think it works is because the narrator believes he's real, but he doesn't know he's not real, right up until the end where he finds out. And then maybe you can make a case for absence presence. But she says that it's Tyler Durden throughout the whole film, so she's just wrong in that case.
There's one more term we need to cover. Fetishism in pop culture is usually understood as someone getting overtly horny at the sight of an object, like a pair of sexy red shoes.
Oddly specific example, but yes, fetishism is, well, the standard definition anyway, is a sexual desire for something to an abnormal degree that isn't overtly sexual. And it's either that or the worship of an inanimate object, because it is believed to have magic powers or is inhabited by a spirit. So I can expect that you are going to try and redefine it.
Cultural theorist Thomas Jüngling wrote that it's more useful to think of fetishism as it has been defined in psychoanalysis, not as the overvaluation of some part object, but as a denial of lack.
Yeah, see what I mean? This is from a cultural theorist. See what I mean about something theory or something theorist? It's complete nonsense. Every time. So go on, tell me what this version of fetish means.
For example, the American flag is a fetish object, often used to deny a lack of freedom. How can you say I'm not free when I've got this piece of dyed cloth that stands in for freedom?
I mean, to be fair, that's not too much of a reach from the worship of an object because it's inhabited by a spirit. I guess you could say it's the spirit of freedom. But that 2 seconds I spent just thinking about putting it that way is such a better explanation than an object that is a denial of lack.
By continually filling his life with Swedish furniture, Jack fills his life with fetish objects that comfort him. Collecting all these objects distract from what is lacking in his life.
You see, there's a bit of sleight of hand there, right? Originally, fetish meant denial of lack. This is now a distraction from his lack of meaning in his life. So no, they're not fetish objects at all then, by your own definitions. So my god, I hope you didn't take a media theory class, because it appears that you've not actually picked anything up from it.
If only Jack had a friend to tell him what's lacking in his life. Just as Jack fetishizes his furniture, audiences participate in fetishism while watching movies.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
Fetishism occurs on screen within the image, as in the case of the fetishizing of the body of the femme fatale in film noir. But, says Metz, fetishism operates also at a far more basic level. The image as image, and the cinematic apparatus as apparatus are both fetish, because they stand in for, make present, what is absent. As such, they disavow what is lacking.
Man, I could probably make a half-hour video on that one section alone. But I think my main takeaway from that is that basically they've just replaced fetish with their absence-presence theory. And it just feels like this is a massive obfuscation of language, which leftists always do. And it seems to come from all these something theory schools of thought. I mean, it seems to be exclusive to that. And I mean, I'm just so used to reading scientific text and literature that's just like, here's a name of something I've discovered, here's me explaining what I've discovered. This then goes, oh, here's a load of ideas, right? I'm going to then just repackage and rename them and then confuse you. And it somehow makes them seem clever. Like, sorry if I'm being ignorant, but the man's just basically said the same thing you were saying before with absence-presence. Media theory is literally telling people how to watch movies, and I don't think that's a good thing to do. I would never tell someone how to watch a movie.
Just as Jack fetishizes furniture to deny the lack in his own life.
Oh, see, it switched again. Originally it was just, oh, it's a distraction from the fact he doesn't have any meaning in his life. Now it's, oh, it's a denial that he doesn't have any meaning in his life. Can't keep switching these words. You gotta choose one and stick to it.
We fetishize the cinematic image to deny the lack of reality represented by that image. I know Spider-Man is a fictional character, but when I see him die, I feel like a real person has died.
See what I mean? It's exactly the same as the absence-presence. She's done the absence-presence disavowal fetish. They all mean the exact same thing. Every time the example is I know but. Why do we need 3 different words to explain the same concept? It's really annoying.
If only we had a movie to tell us what's lacking in our lives.
That's literally why we have stories and myths. Life is so damn complicated, we need stories and myths to simplify and help us understand life. This is why art and life imitate each other. Because different aspects of art can help us understand life, and different aspects of life can inspire art. Anyway, we're finally going to get to some analysis, thank God for that.
Fight Club is a story told by an unreliable narrator, whose goal is to explain away his own guilt and justify the position he's established as the leader of a terrorist organization. An organization he knowingly and willingly created because he wants the rest of the world to be as miserable as he is.
Imagine watching Fight Club and having that be your takeaway from it. This just doesn't make sense on any level when you actually watch the film. Because if Tyler's the real person, how the hell does he die when the narrator shoots himself in the cheek? And then the made-up narrator ends up living on with Marla? Doesn't make any sense. You've watched the film, you completely got the wrong take from it.
The narrative is told by and controlled by Tyler. Jack isn't Tyler's alter ego or imaginary friend. In Jack, Tyler has created the perfect candidate for Project Mayhem, confident that we will see ourselves in Jack, that we will identify with Jack's insecurities, doubts about society, and fear of self-examination.
Wait, hang on, so is the narrator real in this version then? Are they both real people? Because again, if that's the case, then half the film doesn't make sense. For example, there are scenes where Project Mayhem members look at the narrator all confused when he's asking why they're committing terrorist acts. It's because it was the narrator telling them, and they don't really understand that he's got a split personality. And also the narrator doesn't keep any memories from Tyler Durden. So no, you can't watch this film and conclude that Tyler Durden is real, and you can't even say, oh, this is just a reading, it's subjective. No, the film objectively tells you you're wrong.
In a 1999 interview, Fincher speaks to Tyler's embodiment of disavowal.
You have to have a guy that's going, well, I can see your point, but it seems to me you can look at losing all of your stuff both ways. Yeah, it's all of your stuff. Yeah, it took you years to collect. Yes, they were all tasteful, interesting choices, but there's another side to it.
Oh, I love this. So, I cut it out before, but when she's talking about the I know but statements, she specifically says, I'm not saying every I know something but statement is disavowal. And this isn't disavowal. This isn't disavowal at all. This is saying, yes, you're looking at it all as a tragedy, but it could also be an opportunity. That is what David Fincher is saying here. Which is why I keep saying that Maggie doesn't seem to have understood her own film theory. And this is why she's ended up with one of the worst takes possible with Fight Club.
Tyler anticipates our moral reservations, lays them out in a very childish terms, and then goes, but, and gives Jack a prepackaged, simplistic counter-argument.
I say, let's evolve. Let the chips fall where they may.
Okay, whatever that means.
It's going to be hard to get through this video without insulting Maggie at some point. I probably already have. But how is it not obvious what he's saying there? It's just, yeah, your apartment blew up. Yeah, you're in what can only be seen as a tragedy and a disaster. But instead, hey, you admit yourself, you weren't happy with this life. This wasn't fulfilling you. So maybe instead see this as a new beginning. That's basically what he's trying to say to him. I don't understand how this is hard to understand.
Tyler needs to invent the character of Jack to give us a friendly, gullible fetish object to identify with.
Oh, see what this is why I had to go through that beginning bit that I really didn't want to go through. You'd have no idea what she meant by a fetish object there. And honestly, I don't really think you need to invent someone like the narrator here. The narrator is quite a lot of people in the US. Well, not even people in general, I just mean men. Men who were relatively unhappy with their lives, are very materialistic, very consumeristic, and they work jobs that they particularly don't want to do for lives that have basically no meaning in them. And now you're letting me know that yes, the narrator is indeed made up. You didn't make that clear before. Okay, he's made up. It doesn't make sense to make him up. You don't need to make the narrator up. The narrator is a lot of people in the US, and, well, throughout the West, really.
Jack is the image we can attach ourselves to so that we can tell ourselves that we, just like Jack, were innocent all along.
So it's a really annoying way she's analysing this film as well. She keeps jumping within sentences between a analysis of the film in terms of what it's telling the audience in a meta sense, and also how characters are actually interacting in the film. For example here, she doesn't mean, oh, this is telling the audience that they should feel innocent for things they've done, even though that's what she said. She means Tyler. Tyler's made him up so that he can feel innocent for what he's going to do. Which it doesn't make sense as to why she's doing it here, because he's not committed any terrorism at this point. Again, within the film, it makes no sense, and it has not been told to the audience why Tyler would need to make up someone like the narrator at this point. Because quite frankly, he's not done anything wrong yet.
We are free to enjoy the violence, even up to and including terrorist acts, because in the end we see Jack's image standing there, victorious.
How have you got this reading from this film? What the hell? At no point is terrorism excused here. Throughout the film, every time there's an act of terrorism, the narrator is telling every Project Mayhem member that terrorism is bad. The protagonist, the person that the audience is supposed to project themselves onto, is saying what most audience members will agree with. Yes, terrorism is bad. It's not excused terrorism in any way, and I don't know how you got that reading from it. And I don't know why you're saying that it's victorious at the end. The narrator is clearly unhappy about this. Even admits, oh, this is a really messed up part of my life. I.e., it looks like something he regrets.
The image of Jack remains, although he now admits that he's Tyler. Jack's image is present, but Jack is absent. Tyler's image is absent, but Tyler is present. By ending on Jack's image, we deny the lack of morality in what Tyler has done.
Everything's gonna be fine.
We can deny that this power fantasy is appealing to guys like you and me because the good guy, or at least the image of the good guy, is the one left standing in the end.
Right, so let me rephrase that just a bit, because it's mental. What we see in the film, at the end, is Jack, or I don't know why she keeps calling him Jack. The narrator's image is actually taking the place of who Tyler is, or was. Ignoring the big old scene where when the narrator realises he's Tyler Durden and goes back through all the terrorist scenes, and Tyler's image is replaced with the actual narrator, because that's what actually happened, completely destroying this reading of the film, by the way. What Maggie is now saying here is that Tyler is dead, and we have taken on this innocent face of the narrator. And because he says everything's going to be fine, that means that he is justifying all his actions. Yeah, no, that's not what happened. Him saying everything is going to be fine is basically him understanding Tyler's perspective of tragedy, in that it is actually an opportunity. It is him trying to integrate his shadow after killing off the worst parts of it. But she is right that men do have an innate attraction to violence. The reason is probably because it is the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived, i.e. it makes us feel in control even when we're being punched in the face. Because it's a very primitive and basic rule set. I win, I'm better than you win, you're better than me. There's not too many ways to do that in modern life, and that's exactly what Fight Club is trying to criticise with modern society. There's nothing there to satisfy men's primitive instincts, and, you know, maybe women's too, but it seems to affect men a lot more. Because Maggie appears to be a leftist, as a lot of the guest speakers in this video are leftists, so I assume they're her friends, she doesn't understand this and even tries to say, hey, I like violence too, despite the fact she probably doesn't get it on the same level as men.
Fight Club is a movie that's clearly designed to be watched multiple times, but with each viewing we disavow more and more.
I mean, that's very subjective. I agree it's been designed to be watched over and over again. I don't agree every time you watch it you're going to be disavowing more and more necessarily. In fact, when I originally watched it, I thought all the violence was wrong. I thought even the Fight Club was wrong. On subsequent watches, I understand the point of the Fight Clubs. And I in fact seem to be disavowing less and less each time I watch it. Because I'm understanding the concepts and the ideas it is trying to pass on to me. It's not just trying to say that violence is bad because it inevitably makes terrorists. What it's really more trying to say is that clearly quite a lot of men are missing something quite deep and meaningful in their lives. And if it's not addressed, then maybe men will end up doing something stupid.
Usually, when we watch a movie for a second time, we're able to break down a story's structure a little bit better and recognize key themes more clearly. We start to see the strings.
Sure, I can agree with that. If you're going to analyse a film, I'd certainly try and watch it more than once.
As viewers, solving a mystery is both entertaining and comforting. We want to understand what really happened in this fictional universe, and Tyler lays out a pretty fun, sardonic, flashy answer to the mystery of who is Tyler Durden.
Man, this is just getting worse and worse. Now the readings move to, oh, Tyler actually wanted to get found out, and in fact made it a whole showmanship piece. Which, yeah, complete wrong reading in the film, because Tyler doesn't exist.
Once we feel like we have that answer, even though it is just Tyler's version of what happened in this fictional narrative, we get to sit back on this second viewing and just enjoy the ride.
Man, she has really strong convictions that her reading's right here, but it is just completely wrong. And I don't know about you, but I know in my experience of watching through Fight Club subsequent times, what I was looking out for and what I found was the clues that the film was giving me to let me know that Tyler was actually the narrator. Because I think you're actually a lot more likely to just sit back and enjoy the ride on the first viewing. Then when you get that twist, you go, wow, I want to watch that again and really find out how they made that work. Because they made it work really, really well.
However, repeat viewings do not give us a deeper understanding of Marla's perspective, even though she would have a pretty insightful view of Tyler.
Yeah, well, I'm not particularly surprised at that. The narrative is about the narrator and his view on things, along with Tyler's, because obviously he's his split personality. It's not about Marla.
A view that we should want if we truly wanted to understand him more accurately, or understand the deeper implications of the story. But we don't. Yeah,
no, total disagree on this. Because Marla's relationship with the narrator and Tyler is basically that when the narrator is the narrator, he's slightly more sensitive, appears to want something meaningful with her, eventually after the whole support group bit, and gets very jealous of her and Tyler shagging. Whereas Tyler literally just sees her as a sex object and even calls it sport fucking. So if you actually saw the film from her perspective, yeah, the twist is just gone, you can't have the same film. And in fact you get the perspective from her anyway, because she literally tells the narrator that basically he's messed up and very confusing. Like, that's her perspective, and of course that's her perspective, because the man's got split personality disorder.
Instead, Tyler frames her emotions as the butt of a mean joke, while seeing his emotions as valid.
Well, if that was the case, why would his invented character of the narrator even bother trying to save her by telling her to get out of the city? And why at the end would he then be holding hands with her, saying, yes, I want to be with you, everything's going to be okay with us? What the film actually tells us makes sense. That Tyler Durden is after nothing but fulfilling his masculine urges, the types that subconsciously the narrator really wants fulfilled, but they are not being fulfilled. While at the same time the actual narrator does want something deep and meaningful with probably anyone at the beginning of the film, but it turns out Marla's his best chance, because to be fair, she got screwed around a lot and he feels bad for that. That's why he says at the end, you met me at a very strange time, everything's going to be fine. A lot was meant by that one line.
On repeat viewing, instead of breaking down the movie, we're sucked deeper into Tyler's narrative, deeper into his perspective.
Yes, the film is about the narrator. The film can't work if we get anyone else's perspective. If you get anyone else's perspective, boom, the twist is gone. You'd need to make a particularly different movie, but I don't think it's going to be a good movie with Marla, because really her character development isn't that interesting, at least when compared to the narrators.
We're not just seeing puzzle pieces fit together in the order that Tyler has preordained.
What do you mean that he's preordained? It's a chronological film. I'm really confused by what her perspective is. Does she think that Tyler has split personality, or does she think that this film being told by him has completely fabricated a character here that he is completely aware of his actions? Because the whole interesting part about Fight Club is that the narrator doesn't realise that Tyler Durden is himself. If Tyler realises the narrator is him, and that this is all preordained, all of a sudden, this story isn't that interesting. The interesting part comes from his character decisions. Comes from the fact that he is completely predictable to Tyler because Tyler is the narrator and knows everything about him, and what he'd probably try and do to save someone. Hence the cop scene as well. How does this scene work if the narrator isn't even real? Why would Tyler risk his own life like this?
We're feeling how he wants us to feel about every character. Rewatching scenes with Marla, which should make us empathize with her since we now know that Tyler is treating her like garbage, instead make her the object of ridicule.
Yeah, there are some scenes where she's the butt of the joke, I get it, but I mean quite a lot of people do seem to empathise with her when they find out that Tyler has been treating her pretty terribly. Because on the first watch through, you actually think that she's basically a bit of a bitch, and that she just seems to be not very well socialised, which you make that assumption because she is essentially a homeless person who steals food and clothes. And then she just seems confused every time the narrator basically puts his feelings forward that, yeah, he's a bit jealous of her and Tyler, and she can't understand why, because obviously they're the same person, but he doesn't know that. And also he can't say that directly because he's been told by Tyler not to talk to her about Tyler. So on a subsequent viewing with that knowledge, yeah, it's actually a lot easier to empathise with her because it's quite easy to understand why she's acting the way she is with the narrator, with the knowledge that, yeah, she's basically being screwed around by him, though it's not his intention.
Fincher's choice of angles, tone, and pacing still privilege Tyler's point of view.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the point.
Look how often Marla is framed with the camera looking down on her. And how often Tyler is framed looking down on us.
I mean, the Tyler thing I do agree with, but again, it completely is dependent on the scene. For instance, this scene that you had in your video not 10 seconds ago shows us looking up to Marla and down on the narrator. Though I will agree in scenes with Tyler and Marla, yes indeed, it is looking up to Tyler, looking down on Marla. The reason being because obviously Tyler is the one in control. Tyler commands presence, hence he is the head of a terrorist organisation. And Marla is, as I said before, a homeless person with not really much to live for, other than stealing food and clothes and cigarettes to survive.
We are rewatching the exact same scene we saw on the first viewing, telling ourselves that we're watching something different this time, since we have new knowledge.
Well, you're certainly watching it with a different context. Honestly, I don't know many people that would say on a second watch through, yeah, Marla is as bad as I thought she was on the first watch through. Because this is the only person that both Tyler and the narrator have close in their lives. So we are actually told quite a lot about what this split personality can do, and how it is affect the people that actually mean something to the narrator here.
But the same argument as before, that Marla is trash and sucks and Tyler hates her and we should hate her too, is only reinforced on this viewing.
I mean, she is trash, but we're not told that we should hate her. Tyler isn't saying anyone should hate her. Tyler doesn't say anything about her other than, yeah, I see her as a sex object. And either way, Tyler is obviously an anti-hero. I mean, no one watches Deadpool and thinks, yeah, I should be exactly like Deadpool. Not every protagonist does everything perfectly, and everyone knows this. For God's sake, Homer Simpson's one of the protagonists of The Simpsons, and he hates Ned Flanders. No one in real life would hate Ned Flanders. It's the exact same thing here with Tyler and Marla.
Jack's inflection seems clueless.
What are you getting out of all this?
On the first viewing, that inflection was understood to be Jack's honest confusion about why Marla is hanging around Tyler. On the second viewing, there's a surface level reading if we take Tyler's narrative at his word that Jack is schizophrenic and is truly confused. But that's not what's going on, because Jack is not there. Jack is absent. That's Tyler talking. Tyler is present.
Yes. You've got a very big brain with all that media theory, I know. But I don't understand why you're making this deep reading for the wrong reading here, that, you're saying Tyler exists when he doesn't, because it's the other way around. It's the narrator that exists when Tyler doesn't. So yes, on your first watch through and your second watch through, yes, both times you are seeing, oh, the narrator is genuinely confused why she is with such an arsehole. On a second watch through, you've got the context that actually this is the narrator acting like a schizophrenic, hence Marla's confusion. And that also adds another layer to her reaction. She is confused because the night before he was a complete twat to her. This morning he's actually being quite sensitive and actually caring about her feelings, from the looks of it. Which is why it's a good idea to watch this film twice. There is a complete new context to the whole film, and even on a third or fourth viewing it will keep you thinking about these characters. And if your takeaway is as simple as, oh, I'm being told to hate Marla, then you're an idiot.
Tyler is telling us this story. By acting confused, Tyler keeps us from empathizing with Marla in this situation, and instead we empathize with Jack, because we've seen this scene before and we were just as confused as he is.
Again, completely subjective. It's oh, you will feel this, that, and the other way, rather than what you should be saying, oh, this scene is trying to get this emotional response from you. Because I think if you actually ask people about this scene before you made this video, I don't think anyone would have come up with that. Basically what's happened here is that everyone's watched this film, including Maggie, and Maggie's managed to come away with a completely different film. Because even if it is Tyler here, acting confused and pretending to care about her feelings, again, why would he even care? Because why would he even bother appearing as this fabrication to Marla? He's got Marla by being himself. And she stayed till the morning, for God's sake. Clearly it's working. You don't need this bit at all with the narrator if you are just seeing her as a sex object.
It's relatable. It keeps us from acknowledging that in the actual world of the story, it's Marla who is infinitely more confused because she's dealing with this irrational, obnoxious person. Tyler knows exactly how much of his asshole persona he can reveal without losing his intended audience.
Again, I think she's confusing the internal consistency of the narrative with what the film is trying to tell the audience. Hence she's saying Tyler's intended audience rather than the film's intended audience. Because what she's trying to say here is that, oh, you've got to keep a relatable side of Tyler Durden to get people to like him. Because if he's just a complete arsehole throughout the film, no one's going to find him that relatable or like him. When what the film's actually trying to say is that this is more of a Jungian shadow type archetype. He is, for lack of a better term, the bad part of the narrator. He is the part of the narrator that he's never actually had to contend with before, but that has been brooding deep inside him because he couldn't find any fulfillment in life. So this has come out of his desire to fulfill some subconscious masculine needs. And because it's not integrated properly, he turns out to be an arsehole. And, obviously worse, a terrorist. But because Maggie's a leftist and doesn't appear to understand men, I think she completely missed this point, and has to make this reading to make any sense of the film whatsoever. Despite the fact that the film's so good that I know plenty of women who have watched this film and even love it, and can understand the intended messaging behind it.
And this movie has an intended audience. This movie is not meant for everyone. This movie is meant for guys like you and me.
Yeah, see, I was right. She went straight from Tyler's intended audience to the movie's intended audience. You gotta make it clear when you're talking about the movie's internal consistency, and the plot, and the writing and all that, and when you're talking about meta-subjects, such as who is the film's intended audience. I can only imagine guys like you and me are going to be the worst type of person that she can think of.
It's for nice guys who know they should be getting more out of life.
And I used to be such a nice guy.
Except Jack was never a nice guy, because he never existed.
Yeah, again, the film just doesn't make any sense then. This guy who worked a job, who got another guy fired from his job because he pretended to get beat up by him, who owned an apartment that got blown up by Tyler, i.e. himself. According to you, none of that existed, but the actual reading of the film, what the film tells us, makes a lot more sense. But instead, the narrator had his life sabotaged by Tyler Durden, i.e. his subconscious desire for more masculine meaning. Ends up living with him in a rent-free house that's been abandoned, that's just derelict, but had enough savings to actually fund Project Mayhem with plane tickets to meet about to make new fight clubs and, have this massive decentralized terrorist organization that was going to blow up a load of buildings to wipe out the debt. Makes a lot more sense than what you're saying here.
The mythical nice guy is simply a convenient tool in Tyler's rhetorical utility belt. This movie is for guys who were never nice, but want to claim, it's the world's fault that I'm not nice anymore. Guys who want a fabricated excuse for their toxic, abusive behavior.
For incels, basically. Yeah. I guess if you've got this reading, go on, try and make this argument. But, I mean, the mean guy dies at the end and takes on the nice guy persona in your reading anyway. Clearly the film is saying this is bad. It is bad to be Tyler. But you need to confront this shadow, this bad part of your personality, and integrate it, otherwise you'll tear the world apart. In either reading, that is what the film is telling us. You are an idiot.
On the 4th viewing, Marla is still gross. On the 6th viewing, Jack still provides excuses for Tyler's actions. On the 8th viewing, we still disavow that Brad Pitt is a Hollywood sex symbol, so that we can pretend he's just a regular guy like us.
What the hell are you talking about? Yes, Marla is still gross. That is the point. She doesn't have she's been given the worst lot in life of being homeless and having a terrible place to live. And not even being able to afford food. Of course she's gross. With what the film actually tells us, no, these actions aren't excused by the narrator at all. He tries to stop it every chance he can. Obviously in your reading that's the case, but your reading is moronic, because constantly this nice guy fabrication is trying to stop him at every chance. He's not saying, oh yeah, what you're doing's okay because society's wrong. No, that is what Tyler's doing, and the film is about the narrator confronting that. And then finally, yes, Brad Pitt is still a sex symbol. No one is going to disavow that he is. Man just goes to the gym to try and emulate his hot bod, because fair enough. And this is how the right wing ended up being obsessed with fitness, clearly.
Because no matter how many times you watch it, Tyler is still in control of the story. At best, the narrative constructs him as a messiah. At worst, he's misguided but still right about society.
Wink.
Seriously, what film did you watch? What people admire about Tyler Durden is that, yes, his criticisms in society are right. That doesn't mean that his answers are right. Just because people think Tyler Durden's point about society not really being built for men, making us into women, turning men docile, yeah, people can see that as a good point. That doesn't mean that people want to blow up buildings and wipe out the debt. It means we have to integrate the very real problem that men are very lost in this modern society. Or at least quite a few of them are, so substantially that we have high male suicide rates. That is an indication that society is not working for them.
Tyler narrates scenes that literally did not happen, so that we don't even have a chance to question Tyler's lies.
Man, I'm glad I didn't watch the same film as you, because that sounds terrible. Because every scene in Fight Club happens. The only difference that happens in Fight Club is whether it is that when you see Tyler, that instead is actually the narrator. That's the only thing we're lied about throughout the film. Whereas in the film that you watched, 3/4 of the film didn't even happen. How is that entertaining to watch?
Tyler has to show us the provocative fight first. After all, seeing someone assaulting themselves or pretending to be assaulted in public would make them seem ridiculous. This is provocative.
Assault! They're assaulting me! They're attacking me!
But from a more objective angle, we see it's simply a dork pretending to get beat up.
I'm being pushed! I'm under assault!
This seems really shoehorned in. I have no idea who that is. I get the feeling this isn't actually in here to help her make a point at all. I think she's just trying to attack someone, maybe rightfully so, if he was faking being assaulted. I don't know, I don't care. But, yeah, she's completely missed the point of this scene again. No, Tyler is not pretending to be attacked to try and justify his actions. Tyler doesn't have any justification for what he's doing other than he wants to do it. He's just going to reset everything because he can only see it as opportunity. No, what this is actually saying is that men do actually have a very basic instinct of, we quite enjoy fighting. Because when people, especially men, fight, whether they win or lose, they feel pretty good after. There was a time when I was doing karate, yes, believe it or not, I did karate, And when I got to brown belt, one below black belt, I started going to these special classes. And, first one I went to, I was quite nervous, and I wasn't doing my shouts quite as loudly as I should. And the instructor basically then said, right, we need to talk about fighting spirit. So he got the whole class to kneel around the dojo, and on the mats we had to practice the takedowns, he just paired people up 2 by 2, one at a time, and he's like, right, forget karate, forget anything like that, you're just going to fight. And basically do MMA, but obviously in a very amateurish way. And eventually, everyone was paired up and had their fight. I actually won mine, surprisingly. And it was very brutal. I literally had one of my hands on the guy's neck and was practically strangling him. And I felt pretty bad about it, but at the same time, it's like, no, you're here to do fighting spirit. And basically, you had a whole crowd around you saying, punch him, fight dirty, things like this. And you just end up doing it. And after that class, everyone enjoyed it. Absolutely everyone enjoyed it. The people who fought each other, shook hands, well fought, things like that. Weren't too many cuts and bruises or anything like that, there were a couple. But the point is that this is the point the film's making it here. He's fighting himself because he has a very subconscious will to fight. And it also encourages other men to come in and fight as well. But Maggie clearly doesn't understand this and instead has this take that, oh, he's only doing this to show that he was provoked into doing terrorism. It's a really dumb take from the film.
By the time Tyler shows us this, he's preached so much about how terrible, absurd, and messed up society is. We're primed to see this kind of behavior as justified, or even noble.
Yeah, see what I mean? She's taking this as this is saying that men are victims, and he's trying to make that point. Yeah, no, you will think that if you watched a different film.
If society is absurd, the means of rebelling might as well be equally absurd. That's why, even on repeat viewings, when we know that Tyler is punching himself in this scene, we don't think, that's a sad guy punching himself. We still think, this is cool and funny and different, and this is the origin story of that cool secret club I know about.
No, on a repeat viewing, my takeaway from it, at the very least, was that this was the narrator really trying to unpack his own masculine urge to fight. Because he'd never got in a fight before, but he'd sabotaged his own life, he didn't have anywhere to live, he didn't know what to do, and the only thing really that our basic instinct can help us vent our frustration with is violence. I mean, think about it, if you're working at a computer and the computer suddenly freezes or stops, your first instinct is to hit that computer. It's the chimpanzee part of your brain, something doesn't work, you're frustrated, what's the only thing you know how to do? Punch something. That's the point here. He's lost everything, he's not used to any violence, hence he's made up this character of Tyler Durden, he's split his personality between him and Tyler Durden, and in doing so has made him feel free enough and justified enough to fight. Because Tyler literally says, hit me. So the narrator does, well obviously he ends up punching himself. And then obviously other guys see this. They come over, ask what the hell you're doing, because if two guys are fighting you're going to ask that question. If one guy's fighting himself, you're also going to ask the same question. And then he just invites them to fight. And this is the thing that men like to do. They like to fight. Why do you think boxing and MMA are so popular?
We disavow critical thought in favor of being part of the in-group.
Well, I mean, that's true. Quite a lot of this you seem to have completely forgotten what critical thought is and just seem to be trying to signal your virtues of violence bad, terrorism bad, oh, men are terrible, especially men like Tyler Durden. Which I'm afraid, Fight Club's quite a bit more complicated than that, given that Tyler Durden's criticism of modern society does seem to resonate.
Losing all hope was freedom.
Tyler talks a lot about freedom, about being free. But the kind of freedom Tyler is talking about isn't found in Enlightenment philosophy or the Declaration of Independence, or even in ads for oversized American pickup trucks.
No, you're correct about that. It's one of those unfortunate things with the English language. Freedom does mean a lot of different things. And quite a lot of Fight Club is actually about trying to find these different definitions of freedom. It's more the freedom from things than the freedom to do things. Hence the line you just showed, losing all hope was freedom. And again, the reason for this is similar to what happens when he loses his apartment. Clearly the narrator subconsciously felt stuck in this cycle of get up, go to work, buy a load of stuff from IKEA, have insomnia, get up, rinse, repeat, all that. It was a subconscious jail for him. So he wanted freedom for that, hence Tyler Durden here telling him, oh, just evolve. You are free now to do anything. Whatever happens, happens. Don't worry about it. You made the decision. So it'll be interesting to see what your take on this is, given you didn't watch the same film.
Journalist IAR Wiley interviewed a young man who could have been a real-life candidate for Project Mayhem when he said, "We are free from freedom." Wiley elaborates.
He meant that he no longer had to make his own decisions or even think his own thoughts.
Wiley was interviewing a young Nazi who made that proud statement shortly before World War II.
I mean, not only is that poisoning the well quite a bit, you've basically said everyone who joins Project Mayhem is a Nazi, which I don't think is the case in the film. Because Tyler's criticism of modernity aren't really the same as the Nazis' criticism of the Weimar Republic. Tyler doesn't blame any particular group or people for what has happened to modern society. He just blames the system of debt, essentially, and the culture of consumerism and materialism. All these creature comforts, they've made men very docile. It's not really the same freedom that both this Nazi and Project Freedom are complaining about here.
Eric Hoffer in The True Believer, Thoughts on the Nature of Mass Movements, explains that this kind of freedom
is not the freedom of self-expression and self-realization, but freedom from the terrible burden of an autonomous existence. They want freedom from the fearful burden of free choice.
If this is how you're categorising Project Mayhem, it's not quite the case. I mean, I can see where she's going to go with this, with the whole, oh, they give themselves a hierarchy, they follow Tyler's orders, they follow his rules and all this. With the idea being that now that modern society's gone, there's nothing tying them to it, and then they do have the freedom to choose what to do from the bottom up. To go back to their hunter-gatherer instincts, which Tyler is obviously telling them, is why they love Fight Club so much. Whereas the Nazis, yeah, that's not what they were trying to do. They were trying to say that the German people can only be free when they actually have everything in Germany under their control, rather than being under the control of whichever group they are scapegoating. And that the only way to get to that is to have total war and have an empire similar to the other empires, which were much bigger than that of the Prussians before the Germans, or the Germans themselves. And that outside groups, such as the French signing the Treaty of Versailles, and other groups that are more internal to Germany, were stopping them from fulfilling their racial destiny. And they wouldn't be free until they were at that point. And it's actually pretty similar with communists as well, but obviously we're not talking about them yet. Whereas a more liberal take on freedom is, the world is as it is, there's not too much you can do about it. The best we can do is have a government that doesn't infringe on your ability to do what you want, as long as it's not infringing on other people's rights to do what they want. But obviously that outlook is bastardised by Project Mayhem, because Project Mayhem is essentially saying modern society is stopping you from having your baser primitive instincts fulfilled, so it needs to be torn down.
The idea of free will or free choice is antithetical to Tyler's worldview. Freedom means having a gun placed at the back of your head by a stranger and being told what to do. And conveniently for Tyler, he sets up a system which strips everyone else of choice, leaving Tyler with the ability to choose for them.
Well, again, here's the thing you're misunderstanding about the film. It's also having a bit of a critique of atomised individuality. The fact that the narrator is a bit of a voyeur in that he will go to group therapy sessions is basically the only way you can have interpersonal relationships with anyone, because all he does is go to his job, go to these therapy sessions and buy stuff. And because he's under-socialised in that way, obviously that's causing his insomnia. It's the only thing he can find. So what Fight Club does is try and give these men a club so that they can have these interpersonal relationships by making them feel like they are part of this group. And to be part of a group, you actually need structure and rules. And with your own freedom, you can actually break these rules or not do these instructions that Tyler is telling you. But they feel fulfilled by this, so they carry on doing it. And in fact, this club is also illegal. So they are actually making the conscious choice to break the law, breaking the rules of modern society, to go to this dissident group underground. If any of them had initiative, they would probably go off and make their own group. But if you feel fulfilled by this group, why would any of them do that?
You are free to punch, you are free to blow things up, but you are not free to do just anything.
Yeah, no, you've completely missed the point of the store clerk scene if you think he was actually going to kill him. The whole point of that scene is that he's telling the store clerk, look, you've got a really bad life and you actually had more aspirations for yourself. Yet you're stuck in this dead-end job with a terrible basement apartment that's cramped. You're not living a good life. If you've got something you want to work towards it, or I'm threatening to kill you. But he's never actually going to kill him. He's making the point that if you've actually got a physical threat to do something, it's a damn better motivator to overcome the psychological fear of failure. It's basically what his issue was. There was too much schooling for him. Okay, if there's too much schooling, I'm just going to kill you then because you're going to live to be nothing. That was the threat, but he wasn't actually going to kill him. But the store clerk doesn't know that, so he runs off and does whatever he does with his life. You can only assume became a vet. But that's not a lesson about freedom. That was a lesson about focusing on the big things in life, having a plan that is longer than how long is it going to take me to get to work today.
To Tyler, these violent physical categories of knowledge are good, but there are categories of knowledge which he finds distasteful, which he wants to eliminate.
Why do guys like you and I know what a duvet is?
Simply knowing what the word duvet means is immoral to Tyler.
No, it's not immoral. The whole point of that scene is that he ends up saying the things that you own end up owning you. I mean, at the start of the conversation, the narrator says everything I own was in there, and he starts talking about a goddamn sofa he was going to buy. And his point in saying why do we know what a duvet is that you wouldn't need to know what a duvet is to survive. He then expands that to say, we don't really care about murder or crime rates or theft or anything like that. What concerns us is this hyper-consumerist lifestyle. We are consumed by it, ironically enough. And the narrator even mentions that, okay, it is just stuff. Well, at least my insurance will cover it. To which Tyler says, well, just don't fall in the same trap as last time, is my advice, but do what you want. I mean, he doesn't really have a coherent moral system, Tyler. He's just an instinct, basically. The most basic instinct, one could say, of that if something feels threatening to my life in one way or another, it needs to be destroyed.
Guys like you and me should not be allowed to know what a duvet is. We are men. We are hard. Duvets are prohibited for guys like you and me.
Yeah, you've missed the point. He doesn't have a problem with people making these choices. He's saying that in making these choices, what ends up happening is that we end up being distracted from our own basic instincts and desires and instincts that really need to be integrated and aren't being integrated in modern society. That's his point. You can have a duvet, just make sure that you're not a massive lazy slob who gets fat. That's all he's really saying there.
Why does Jack feel so empty? Why does Jack feel so lost? Does he feel crushed by the superficiality and alienation inherent in capitalism?
Well, I mean, capitalism is actually never brought up in the film at all. They call it consumerism. We are consumers. This is just another example of her shoehorning in some leftist rhetoric.
Does he have a terminal illness? Is it because the word duvet exists? It's because Jack isn't real.
I love that this film is trying to explore why some men might be depressed and trying to kill themselves in modern society. And that is just so out of Maggie's mind, so outside of her worldview, that she basically says, oh yeah, this can only be from a made-up guy. That's probably genuinely informed part of her outlook on this analysis.
He's a straw man whose mortal enemy is a fancy word for blanket.
I mean, to be fair here, Maggie, you have just made up a completely different film in your own mind here.
Let's take a closer look at one of the characters Tyler indoctrinates. A character whose life Tyler believes Tyler changes for the better.
Hang on, are we doing the store clerk scene? He doesn't indoctrinate him. I don't think the store clerk's in any scene apart from this one. He's not indoctrinated at all. He just threatens him with death unless he becomes a vet. That's not indoctrination. That's him making a point to the narrator.
In the only scene where we actually see Tyler intimately engage with one of his converts, Tyler drags this stranger, Raymond, outside while he's working and puts a gun to the back of Raymond's head.
I'm so confused by this. So, do you think that Raymond, the store clerk here, do you think he's actually been indoctrinated? Do you think the film's telling you that he's been indoctrinated by Tyler Durden in this scene? And I mean, for God's sake, you constantly see him interacting with the narrator. You don't need scenes where he's interacting with other people because he's clearly just interacting in a similar manner with his converts than he is with the narrator.
Then, based solely on the fact that Raymond has an expired community college ID in his wallet, Tyler assumes the heck of a lot about Raymond's hopes and dreams, gets him to admit under duress that he gave up his goal of being a veterinarian, then threatens that if Raymond doesn't go back to school, Tyler will find Raymond and murder him.
I don't know why you're saying that he assumes all that. He's literally told that. When asked what are you studying, he says stuff. He says, what stuff? You know, more detail. Oh, vets with animals and stuff. He's not assumed any of that. He's literally told all of that. And it's very reasonable to think that he gave up on studies if you went to a community college. You've still got the ID in your wallet that's expired, yet you're working in a crappy convenience store. Like, did you just not watch the film? I don't understand.
Just very, very inspiring stuff. We know that Tyler just wants to push this guy to be his best self. We know that Tyler is trying to motivate men to be men, to take charge of their lives.
Yes, that's the point he's trying to make to the narrator. And again, he wasn't actually going to kill the guy. The revolver was empty, it didn't have any bullets in it. But his point was that you can't just talk to men into going towards their motivations. Threatening them is a hell of a lot better motivator. The hardest step to take is often the first one. If you've got worries about risk, that is understandable, but how about I make it a certainty that if you don't even try and do this, you're gonna die? Is it something we should be doing in real life? No, absolutely not. Is it an idea we should maybe integrate into civilized society? Yes, absolutely. People working towards their aspirations is absolutely something everyone in the world should be doing. Unless it's criminal, of course.
Raymond does not know this. We do not know Raymond's perspective. We do not establish his mundane job. We do not see him standing behind the counter as Tyler rushes in like an ordinary robber.
Yeah, he's a stereotype, you idiot. I've worked in a shop before. You've probably not worked in a shop before, actually. But you can probably imagine what it's like just to stand behind a till all day. It's not a particularly inspired life. Tyler goes after a store clerk because it is quite a low-status job. That is the point. He must have better aspirations than that.
If we heard Raymond's side of the story, he would tell us about a time a lunatic robbed him, spouted a bunch of pseudo-philosophical BS.
Yeah, he'd probably say it's pretty traumatic, you're right. That's why it's effective. But it doesn't matter because the story isn't about him. The story is about the narrator learning about his basic instincts and basic desires.
Only stole his driver's license and then left. Tyler tells us a story about how Tyler is a messiah. We are left assuming that Tyler changed this man's life for the better. We do not know that. Whether or not Raymond actually gets his degree doesn't matter.
Yes, this is why your reading doesn't work. If this was about how Tyler isn't particularly helpful, we would have found out that this wasn't particularly helpful. But we don't, because the whole point is that the narrator is learning a lesson. This is why I don't understand how you got this reading.
Tyler doesn't want us to imagine how Raymond actually feels. Tyler wants us to imagine how Tyler wants Raymond to feel.
Oh, it is rhetorical, but no, incorrect. At that point, the narrator says he feels ill because he's just seen someone threaten to kill another man. He has never seen that before in his life. His point is that, yes, he will feel a lot worse at the moment because he just had his life threatened. However, he goes on to say that tomorrow will be the best day of his life because not only did he feel like he cheated death, but he is also working towards his aspirations. Now, whether he achieves them or not the point. But he's not only going to feel like he is now on the right path in his life, he's also going to feel like he just survived a lethal encounter. And that's pretty euphoric from what I hear.
In reality, Raymond is not liberated. In reality, Raymond has no choice but to follow Tyler's orders. Raymond hasn't been watching this movie, so Raymond has no reason to trust Tyler. No reason to buy into this arcane plan.
What arcane plan? In reality, all he's going to know is, if I don't walk towards this aspiration I told him about, I'm going to die. When really he's not going to be visited again. And the point of taking the license is to make the threat feel a bit more real, because obviously he knows where he lives. And obviously the licenses play a bigger role later on in the film, but I don't think you bring it up, so I'm not going to bother myself.
Tyler asks Raymond a straightforward question.
Raymond K. Essel, 1320 Southeast Banning, Apartment A. Small, cramped basement apartment, Raymond.
The answer to his question is yes, but since Tyler is telling the story, Raymond answers,
How did you know?
What, are you kidding? Are you telling me that if someone just from your address could guess what type of house or apartment you lived in, your first question wouldn't be, how the hell did you know that? Do you speak to people?
Tyler is telling us about a time when he robbed someone and pointed a gun at the back of their head. And in telling the story, Tyler needs to emphasize that he knows everything.
This is such a weird read. Why would any author write like this? This would only make sense in context of Tyler telling other people this story. What you've done here is just made up a completely different film in your head, as I keep saying.
So he has this person, in the middle of what they think might be their last moments on Earth, praise Tyler's intelligence.
He's not praising his intelligence at all. What's probably going through his head is, oh my god, this guy's about to shoot me. Oh my god, he not only does he know what type of apartment I live in, he knows where I live. How does he know this? Has he been following me? This is a perfectly human reaction to having someone know quite a lot of things about your life. You're acting like this is an unrealistic scenario? No, this is completely believable. You are an idiot.
Tyler is right about everything.
How did you know? Because they give shitty basement apartments letters instead of numbers.
I don't even know if that's true, but we don't have time to question it. Because Tyler's never wrong.
Whether it's true in reality or not doesn't really matter. In this universe, though, it's clearly true. Because Tyler probably picked up that knowledge and then used it here. And the guy who had a gun to his head agreed, yes, I do live in a small cramped basement apartment. It's simply an in-universe explanation of how he knows it's a cramped basement apartment, while at the same time not actually having any idea who this guy is. That's the point.
Tyler wins in every situation, no matter how absurd. Everything Tyler sets out to achieve, he accomplishes. Because this is Tyler's story, and he is the hero.
Again, the film isn't telling you that Project Mayhem is a good thing. It is telling you it may be a thing that happens if consumerism keeps going the way it's going.
Even his victims think so.
How did you know?
Even on the second viewing.
How did you know?
What is this read of, even his victims love him. His victims want to praise him. I mean, I've already gone through it, but my god, what film did you watch? Because you did not watch Fight Club.
Notice how when Tyler was trying to ask Raymond, what did you want to be, it takes multiple questions and the threat of physical violence.
Wow, it's like he doesn't know everything.
But when it comes to praising Tyler, Raymond's response is immediate.
How did you know?
Watching Tyler drift through the story is like watching someone play a video game with God mode on.
What the hell are you talking about? At what point is he just walking through a load of cops shooting at him and not dying? What is this reach? This is the worst reading of this film I think I've ever seen, hence I'm making the video.
Raymond's existence in Tyler's story serves Tyler.
Yes, it's serving Tyler as a lesson to the narrator. The read you're going for doesn't make sense. You've basically called him a Gary Stew. Which if it was a Gary Stew, he wouldn't be that interesting to talk about.
Later we see a door covered in driver's licenses. We never see Raymond again. Raymond is reduced to a bureaucratic identification card. If he did not go back to school, he's dead because Tyler killed him. If he did go back to school, he's dead because he is no longer in control of his own life. He has been sacrificed to appease Tyler. Raymond's name and face are present, but Raymond's point of view is absent.
Yes, the whole point of taking the identity card is basically to partially take away their individual identity. That's part of the point of Project Mayhem. But the point is that they're working towards something they're aspiring for, which is, as Tyler Durden has indoctrinated them into thinking, going to rock bottom makes them perfectly free, and then they can literally do whatever they want. That is what they've been indoctrinated into, yes. But with Raymond it's a bit different. He's not been indoctrinated into anything. He was used as nothing more than a point to make to the narrator. The point of let the little things go because bigger aspirations are always going to be more meaningful than the little things. And sometimes you need a gun to the back of the head to make you let those things go.
You had to give it to him.
No, we don't. Jack is there to put up the flimsiest defense, except Jack is not there. Tyler tells us he's there to reassure us that we're questioning this ridiculous situation along with Jack.
He doesn't give a defense. He doesn't defend that action at all. He just says, oh, he had a plan, and it made sense in a strange way, in that he's going to show people that the little things don't matter, and, as he said earlier, evolving towards your aspirations is the only thing that matters. You've completely missed the core concept of this film, and I just don't understand how. That's how well this film's made. You have actually confused me with how much you've missed the point.
That wasn't funny. What the f was the point of that?
But Tyler is holding the gun. There's no actual voice of reason in this scene, only in the telling of it, for our sake.
See, I think this is really getting to the core of my problem with this take. The point of the unreliable narration of Fight Club is that there is actually something real going on. But if you only read this as Tyler is the real person and the narrator is the fake person, then you don't actually know what happens in reality at all. Whereas with Fight Club with the narrator being the real person and Tyler being his split personality, then it makes a lot more sense. And all those scenes where it goes through the flashbacks, recontextualizing it with the narrator being in the place of Tyler, yeah, it makes a lot more sense. You don't get that if Tyler is the actual person here.
The underground fight clubs are supposedly formed in search of some truth, in search of freedom, but they are predicated on deception.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of right. The whole point of the fight club is that it's partly a outlet for the men's frustration, since the narrator describes it as one of the group therapy sessions, but for men only. But also Tyler in these fight clubs gives them direction in life also. But it is deceptive as well, as hopefully she gets it right this time.
The first rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
By repeating that rule, Tyler is inviting us to break it. His cadence even punctuates the sentence as if to say, you do not, period, talk about Fight Club.
No, she screwed it. Now, there's quite a few reasons to have a rule like this, and it does make sense. He is not saying this rule with the intention that it should be broken by you. The whole point of this rule is that they don't get caught out by the police and shut down. This is underground and illegal. Obviously don't talk about it because you risk getting caught. It's just another ridiculous reach that is really annoying me.
We are a group of people who want to break society's rules. Here are rules. Break them.
No, you idiot. They're trying to come up with a whole load of alternate rules, and the rest of the rules make sense. And they are generally followed until they're broken by the narrator. And even then, that's only some of them. The narrator talks about Fight Club, and he carries on beating up that one guy even though he's gone limp.
And of course the rules are being broken. That's the only way the group can grow.
Yeah, again, he's not intending people to break these rules. And in fact, not being able to talk about Fight Club actually means you have to come up with your own coded language to actually talk about it. It's a lot more deep than this guy doesn't like rules.
Later, when Tyler calls out his followers for breaking the rules, it's not to punish them. Rather, after a brief interruption by an authority figure, Tyler rewards his men with a new development.
Yes, he starts accelerating Project Mayhem because they start to be found out. It's big enough that the authorities are now on their case, now it's time to move on from there.
For Tyler, being a loser is the first step towards being a winner.
Gotta say, we didn't really go into the idea of freedom there, but here we are. Unless she thinks freedom is when you have no rules, but that's been absolutely no case for any idea of freedom ever. But yes, this is the section where we talk about being a loser.
So Tyler has a plan. Is the plan to succeed? To get a win under his belt to strengthen his leadership position? No!
You're gonna start a fight. And you're gonna lose.
Oh, please tell me you got this bit at least. The point of losing the fight is not to make someone a loser. Please don't tell me you think that's what it means.
So Tyler recruits people who already feel like losers, then immediately gives them a losing task that will make them feel even more powerless.
No, it does the opposite. The whole point, if you listen to that section, is that normal, civilized people will do anything to avoid their basic instinct of fighting someone who disrespects them. They won't fight. They will do anything to avoid a fight. Some of them even half let themselves get beat up before they even start fighting back. And then when they do, they can't even win the fight properly. It's to show these people what society is made of men. It's made them avoid any sort of confrontation. That was the whole point in that scene, and you missed it.
This increases their dependence on Tyler and increases his power base. Like the way the ringleaders of Gamergate target insecure gamers, then tell them that all of their problems are caused by women, people of color, and polygon titties not being big enough.
Right, I did like a 2-hour video covering the Surf's coverage of Gamergate. I'm not going through that again. Just, no, you're wrong.
For Tyler, feeling like a loser is the basis for identity, and the first step in reclaiming masculine superiority.
No, you're confusing having nothing with being a loser. You can have a decent life and still feel like a loser. Tyler's point is that you're not anything special, you're dirt. And basic consumerism isn't going to change that. You need more aspirations than that. And in his mind, the only way to get there is by levelling the playing field for everyone so that everyone needs to learn this.
This conflation of winning and losing parallels the way that neo-Nazis romanticize World War II, or the way pro-slavery Americans romanticize the Civil War.
Do you have examples of either one of those groups? I don't know neo-Nazis that glorify World War II, and I don't know any pro-slavery Americans.
In his 2006 essay about Fight Club and fascism, titled Masochism and Terror, Andrew Hewitt writes,
"This internalization of loss, this paradoxical affirmation of lack as the very basis of identity, marks the apotheosis of the novel assertion that it is precisely this loss of the war that is characteristically German. The fascist internalizes lack, ontologizes alienation as the very condition of German subjectivity."
German identity only came after World War II because the Nazis lost. I'm sorry, you'll have to forgive me. I don't really understand your point here. Please elaborate.
Being a loser becomes the basis for identity.
And you're saying that's in the same way the German identity is based on being a loser. See, I don't know if I agree with that. The Nazis' main thesis was the Aryan race is the superior race. I don't really understand how that is the identity of being a loser.
Instead of feeling shame or regret about war and loss, the fascist doubles down, forming their identity in opposition to an other who has cheated them out of victory.
Are you kidding me? The people I know who are on the fasci side, they tend to say the wrong side won. I don't think they were cheated out of victory at all. They just think they lost the war and they regret it. They do feel shame that they lost it.
Hewitt continues with this quote from Nietzsche.
"Every sufferer instinctively seeks a cause for his suffering. More exactly, an agent, still more specifically, a guilty agent who is susceptible to suffering. In short, some living thing upon which he can, on some pretext or other, vent his effects, actually or in effigy."
Yes, people who suffer will try and outsource the problem, even when it's self-inflicted. I do agree here. I am trying to work out how you're going to bring this into Fight Club.
Tyler is the sufferer who points to society, consumerism, women, or whatever's convenient in the moment as the cause of his suffering.
I don't think you can actually point me to a part of the film where he's saying he's suffering, or even implies he's suffering. His whole philosophy is that he's let things slide that don't matter, and he's going towards his aspiration. His aspiration being an evil one of flattening everything.
This is why he narrates Jack's life is so utterly pathetic, as suicidal, as practically a zombie. Tyler needs Jack to seem powerless, because Tyler's going to show us, through Jack, the path to power.
Yeah, you've completely misshot this idea. You've basically said that Tyler is such a winner here that he literally has to create a loser to have identity, rather than the other way around. That makes a bit more sense, where the narrator is such a loser he has to make up Jack to see what being a winner is like. Because he is so lost in his identity of having no meaning, he literally has to split his own personality to make a winner.
Assuming that Project Mayhem actually succeeds and resets debt to zero, which in itself is an absurd fetishized plan.
Resetting debt to zero is a denial of lack. That is the definition of fetishism you are using. I think I need to remind people every time because no one uses fetish that way.
Then Tyler will succeed in reordering society based around loss, based around lack.
I don't even think he necessarily thinks he's going to reorder society. The point of Project Mayhem is to eventually have these men who lack direction in life, who don't feel fulfilled, to give them better direction to try and fulfill it, because in his mind, due to being a split personality from the narrator, he thinks these creature comforts and making life too easy is basically making these men suffer. It's not to make them losers, it's to get them back to ground zero and give them a chance to start from the bottom up that they have never had before. And obviously they seem to go along with this plan. It's not about identity, he is literally taking away their identity.
A lack of economics, a lack of structure, a lack of order. And he happens to be the leader of an organization that is ready to step in and impose its own economics, its own structure, its own order.
Well, no, they don't have a plan for after it. That's why it's called Project Mayhem, because it will be anarchy afterwards. They don't have a plan beyond resetting debt to zero. When that happens, they think all materialism in the world will be reset. Tyler isn't doing this to try and rule the world. In fact, he's pretty much doing it so that no one can rule the world, so that we can go back to hunter-gatherer instincts and really find the meaning and freedom that he desires, and that clearly these other men desire through his indoctrination.
Fight Club is extra frustrating because not only is our narrator unreliable, but Fincher himself is also an unreliable storyteller.
Fincher being the director, by the way, and I have no idea what she means by that.
Unlike Rashomon or The Last Jedi, where directors Kurosawa and Rian Johnson utilized unreliable narrators to blatantly call out the subjectivity of storytelling.
Man, I would not give Rian Johnson that much credit.
Fincher indulges in subjective storytelling. He uses clever dialogue and flat acting to misdirect our attention.
Did you know if you mixed equal parts of gasoline and frozen orange juice concentrate, you can make napalm?
No, I did not know that. Is that true?
That's right.
So instead of thinking, oh my god, he's a terrorist, we, prompted by Jack's dialogue, think, oh wow, what a quirky guy.
Yeah, but you're saying that as if we don't think he's a terrorist by the end of the film. Hence the reason the narrator shoots himself in the cheek.
Wow, that Nazi so casually talks about ethnic cleansing. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I gather from that you've not actually heard Richard Spencer talk once. Though he does say some incredibly questionable things and puts forward questionable ideas. Some of which, yes, I will call completely immoral. I think it'd be hard to find anyone who actually tries to defend him who isn't an out-and-out white supremacist, so not a great example. Anyway, I've skipped out a load of stuff about the director, talking about his directing style, because I don't think it's that relevant. We then get on to how we question authority in this film.
When it comes to questioning Tyler's authority, Jack, or our stand-in, only provides one very specific type of question.
What do you want me to do? You just want me to hit you?
Come on, do me this one favor.
Why?
Hey, why do we need bunk beds?
Why? What are you talking about?
He frames his questions as a child asking a parent for their reasoning, instead of actually challenging Tyler's authority.
Sure, kind of, but I think if this was more of a parent-son relationship, then what we'd see is Tyler making stuff up or half-heartedly giving him reasoning. Whereas the answer to every single one of these questions is that Tyler just ignores it. Though these are fairly reasonable questions to ask. Why do we have bunk beds? Why do you want me to hit you? And it can be quite hard to start not doing things that the person you trust has told you to do. Especially when you feel like he's actually helping you, which the narrator does.
Jack never challenges Tyler, never gives an alternative point of view. Always asks for Tyler's justification, giving him another platform to lecture at us.
Giving him another platform to lecture at us. Again, you're mixing up your what the film is telling us versus the internal consistency of the film. You've got to start splitting them up.
And he always accepts that justification, prompting us to accept that justification.
You had to give it to him.
If Jack had a YouTube channel today, he'd probably be a centrist, insisting, I'm just trying to hear both sides.
Yeah, see, stuff like this just seemed to make the mask slip. She had a foregone conclusion here. People she doesn't like this film. They get what the film is saying, they take an interpretation and she hates it. So she has to go, I'm going to watch this film, get the completely wrong take about it, and basically tell them that their hero is not only real in this film, but he is evil. Despite the fact that the people who admire Tyler Durden don't think he's a good person. They just think he has some good points.
Tyler dazzles new recruits with his cool, seemingly anti-authoritarian message, while simultaneously stepping into the role of authority figure.
I suppose that's your brain when you think everything's political? Yeah, this film isn't political. It is a criticism of modern society, don't get me wrong. It is a criticism of consumerism, don't get me wrong. But it's not a criticism of the politics of the modern system. Hence the main targets of Project Mayhem are banks, they're corporations. It's not governments. It's not politics. So stop saying he's anti-authoritarian. He's not anti-authoritarian. He's a lot closer to a Luddite. So yeah, I'm skipping this whole section. When she means the cinema fetishes, she now is using a different use of the word fetish from another media theorist. Why they need about 4 definitions of fetish, I don't know. Well, I do know, it's to obfuscate. But apparently this version of fetish is a bit closer to the original meaning. It basically just means someone who is obsessed with what editing machines can do for films. Anyway, she goes through a bit of the editing for the film, but I'm just going to skip it all. I'm sure it's all true. But she basically does it all to set up this.
So there's this apparent contradiction in Fight Club. On one hand, Fincher's desire to manipulate, pixel by pixel, to create the perfect idealized image. And on the other hand, his trash aesthetic. A desire to portray the world as a giant pile of garbage.
Yeah, no, that's not a contradiction, that's a juxtaposition. I.e., you have the perfect IKEA condo that doesn't fulfill the guy, but living in basic poverty does. And it's a weird message of the film. Yes, I know, that's probably why you missed it.
These ideas may feel out of sync, but there is an ideology that thoroughly embraces this contradiction.
If you can guess what she's going to say here, I'm not going to give you any money because this is entirely predictable.
Here we go. This is where we blatantly connect Fight Club to fascism. Fascism. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that too much of a hard turn?
Yeah, I don't think it's only a hard turn. I just think it's completely wrong. But again, this is why I wanted to go through this video. And man, if you made it this far, well done. But man, I'm not joking. We've got another 20 or so minutes of this video left.
Okay, let me set up the section about fascism with a quote about fascism. David Fincher said a movie sets a fascist dictatorship when he said,
I think a movie sets a fascist dictatorship.
I mean, that's certainly a opinion of what it can be, but people really do confuse authority with fascism. Just because you've got a hierarchy doesn't mean you've got fascism. For God's sake, the Project Mayhem house is a lot closer to just a militant communist state than anything else.
Andrew Hewitt writes,
We have forgotten the proximity of totalitarian thought to the eco-logic of the compost heap. When the narrator of Fight Club tells us that he wanted to put a bullet through the eyes of every panda that wouldn't fuck to save its species, the affinity of that eco-logic with a murderous eugenicism becomes exaggeratedly apparent.
I don't know why film theorists do this. Why do they just chat shit? What the hell is eco-logic? What does it mean we've forgotten the proximity of totalitarian thought to the eco-logic of the compost heap? What does any of that mean?
And regarding the way Tyler turns human fat into explosives, Hewitt writes,
This trope has itself been recycled, this time from the proto-fascist writings of futurist F.T. Marinetti, in whose writings we find the plainest, most violent of futurist symbols. In Japan, they carry on the strangest of trades, the sale of coal made from human bones. All their powder works are engaged in producing a new explosive substance more lethal than any yet known. This terrible new mixture has its principal element, coal made from bones, with the quality of violently absorbing gases and liquids.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I think the reason he used human fat was because it was easy to get and it was free. But yeah, I don't really get how this is all to do with fascism. I don't know why you've gone to someone's writings of his idea of a future Japan. Like, what are you doing?
Fascists, then proto-fascists, have always viewed humanity as disposable, as single-serving, as garbage.
Kind of. I don't even think they agree with the idea of humanity. You're implying that they're not massive racialists. The Nazis wouldn't just throw away Aryan life like that, they put them front and centre. Hence it wasn't them who ended up in camps.
Of course, an ideology that views humans as compost would devise policies that lead to the glorification of death in battle, mass graves, and death camps.
I mean, yeah, Fight Club and Project Mayhem do glorify violence, and I guess when Robert Paulson dies, he is given his individual identity back.
The blonde-haired, blue-eyed Superman is fetish object, denying the lack of perfection in all humans, denying the alienating, painful existence of living under an autocratic regime.
So just having a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person in your mind is a denial of lack. I get why in the Aryan sense you're using this, but I don't know why you're applying this to Fight Club. It's really weird.
Leni Riefenstahl, the Nazi documentarian, was hyper-aware of the fetish value of photogenic young men. While filming her Nazi propaganda film, she got upset that so many actual Nazis didn't live up to her aesthetic expectations.
I'm confused now. What the hell does any of this have to do with Fight Club or Tyler Durden? You've just unironically brought Nazis up, and I don't even think you can tell me why, beyond the fact that the director said that a film set is like a fascist dictatorship. This goes on for longer than it should. Her basic point is that this Nazi filmmaker, in her films, only had the perfect-looking Aryan men. Whereas at Nazi rallies, you'd have a load of people who were fat, didn't look particularly good, weren't particularly muscular, all this stuff, and it was left out of her films.
Tyler's body, actually very sexy Brad Pitt's body, obscures Tyler's true form, that of doughy Edward Norton.
Oh my god. Are you telling me you've read this film as, oh, Tyler's the real person, by the way? Oh, but he doesn't look like that. It's actually Edward Norton's body that's his. You're way overcomplicating this more than the film needs to be. The film is quite easy to follow a second time after that twist. And keeping it the way it was made, that the narrator is Edward Norton's body, and he's always in Edward Norton's body, apart from obviously in those flashbacks where he replaces Tyler Durden's body, and you're trying to work out where Tyler Durden is actually Edward Norton here. Yeah, you don't need to overcomplicate that. You've just got the wrong read.
Tyler invites us to mock Gucci models, disavowing Brad Pitt's own highly sexualized body.
How's that disavowing his body? That doesn't make any sense. He's just pointing out that they'll only have the perfect bodies for these type of adverts, yet they will be sold to men who do not have those bodies. Or it will be sold to them as well as people with those bodies. You're not disavowing anything here. I think you're just going far too into your media theory.
In Fight Club, at least one conventionally unattractive member is allowed, who happens to be the only member who also dies a horrible, horrible death. Bob's body, which his fascist buddies considered grotesque and wrong, is recoded by those same buddies after his death, recycled into a perfect symbol of fascism.
In death, a member of Project Mayhem has a name.
Literally, what are you talking about? The point is that after you've made the sacrifice for Project Mayhem, you've earned your individuality again. That's what they took from that. How is giving someone individuality a perfect representation of fascism? Are you an idiot? Yeah, that's it for fascism, apparently. Apparently the most fascist thing in this film is that a fat guy with tits dies, and that Brad Pitt's got rock-hard abs. Or because some Nazi filmmaker points out that there are fat people in the Nazi rallies. Like, what is going on? Anyway, I'm going to sum up the next couple of minutes here because it's just a long-winded way of saying something quite simple, and something that might not actually be a terrible take in this film until a bit later. But basically, when the narrator is going to all these therapy sessions, it is being seen as, you know, he's being a voyeur, he's getting off on this. And for some reason, Maggie thinks it's overtly sexual, where I think it's a bit more subtle than that, it's a bit deeper than that. But I can see the parallels between that and pornography. But she goes on to say that sexuality is repressed in this film by the narrator, and it seems to be almost sadistic in that he can only get off to other people's pain. Of course, for all this to work, it has to mean that the narrator is the real person and Tyler Durden is not.
In framing the story, Fincher visually links sexual desire with physical illness. It's very telling that Chloe and Bob are both the most emotionally honest and open characters in the entire movie, and the only characters who die in Tyler's telling of it.
Yes, it's tragedy to really kick the narrator into knowing what his actions are causing here, or at the very least what Project Mayhem's are when it comes to Bob. With Chloe, obviously, he's got absolutely no control over her cancer.
Not to mention, they are the characters most guilty of transgressing the gender binary.
Oh boy, here we go.
Bob with his massive breasts and missing testicles, and Chloe whose femininity has been ravaged by her illness, assuming she presented as feminine in the first place.
Yes, I imagine she would have. The whole point of this is that they feel really sad for themselves because Bob doesn't feel like a man, and she no longer feels like a woman. In fact, it's explicit that that's why Bob joins Fight Club, so that he can feel more like a man again.
God forbid Tyler acknowledges any kind of sexual curiosity outside the heteronormative binary.
Well, why would he? He's straight. This is just basic leftism, thinking that everything's a blank slate. Why would he explore outside the gender binary if he's got no interest in it? He just wants to bang women who look like women and are hot.
Tyler strives to make sex undesirable, to make sexual pleasure feel unattractive and pathetic. It's possible to read Fight Club as homoerotic.
Why does everyone need to make a gay reading of a film? Men fighting underground isn't gay.
However, there's no actual love or attraction between men. Despite the constant homoerotic imagery, he seems completely uninterested in any kind of sex.
So I did cut this out before because I didn't think she brought it up again. But the reach to get to a homoerotic reading of this was basically that the sound of people punching each other and the sound of blood coming out of their mouths apparently sounded sexy, because it sounds like a slap on the ass. That was not me slapping myself on the ass, by the way, that was me slapping my thigh. And that wet chokes sound like other particularly sexual acts. But if that was the case, I think MMA would be quite a gay sport.
The most homoerotic moments are between Tyler and Tyler.
You probably watch shows based in medieval times, see knights kiss the ring of the king or lord or whatever, and think, whoa dude, that's gay.
Even Marla seems like a toy at best.
Yes, a sex toy. Oh god, this is such a bad take. Clearly Tyler is straight. Clearly he's not sexually repressed, given he's banging the one woman in the film. You're just making all these reaches because you have to. Because you've somehow managed to miss the fact that the narrator is the real person and Tyler's the made-up person.
Marla is portrayed as disgusting, haggard, unkempt. Fincher does everything he can to make us feel that Marla is stinky, and once again links sexual desire to physical illness.
This is cancer, right?
Her sex scenes are so depraved.
I haven't been like that since grade school.
So extreme or so abstract, they're devoid of any conventionally erotic imagery. This is not sex for pleasure. This is sex as performance. Tyler was performing heterosexuality. Sex for the sake of telling his friends, I banged that chick.
Tyler is gay actually is not one of the takes I would have thought would have come from this video, but here we are. No, the whole point of this, the point in all this extreme and depraved sex, is another issue with modernist culture. One that he even points out by saying, look at all these hypersexualized images you see. It's to point out that, yeah, there is a real problem these days where some men can't even get hard unless they're doing something sadistic, because of how easy it is to access porn these days. It's not that he's gay, it's that it's so easy to get the other pleasures in life that you need to go extreme to try and find a new high, if you will. Anyway, after this, there's a reference to a film, The Green Door, or one of the support groups that Maggie goes on a 10-minute tangent on. I'm just going to skip all that, and again give you a quick synopsis. Essentially, the idea is that Fight Club parallels The Green Door, because in The Green Door, when you go through The Green Door, you are in this room where you have to follow specific rules. If you break them, you'll be dealt with, but eventually if you follow them all the way to the end, you'll have pleasures you've never felt before, basically. And so she makes the analogy with Tyler, because it's a fair comparison, I think.
In the chemical burn scene, Tyler has set up a false parallel to the support groups. Tyler's goal in the scene is to make this act of physical assault seem comparable with the existential and chronic pain experienced by members of the support group. Tyler, who is a physical and emotional abuser, manages to make his actions seem as inevitable as death by terminal cancer.
Well, yeah, that's part of the critique of modern consumerism the film is trying to put forward. If you ignore mainly men's innate needs and wants and desires and don't integrate them properly into society, of course they're going to react in the way like Project Mayhem does. That's the idea of the film anyway.
Those support group members do not have a simple, immediate means of alleviating their pain. They can't just pour vinegar on their cancer or missing testicles. But to a naive audience member who hasn't had to cope with long-lasting emotional or physical trauma, who is looking for a reason to claim victimhood, the comparison may feel attractive.
I think even people who have dealt with that before will easily take quick alleviations to pain than carry on with anything that's terminal or anything that's going to keep causing pain. But yes, let's see where you go with this.
Tyler feels like he has all the answers.
You can run water over your hand to make it worse, or look at me! Or you can use vinegar to neutralize the burn.
Even though he's concocted an absurd scenario with a predetermined conclusion. And this happens to be the only moment in the entire film where Marla is presented as sexually desirable in a visual sense. Jack makes one last-ditch effort to block out the pain and pursue pleasure. And this is the moment that Jack closes his green door. He stops trying to escape to his safe space and never bothers trying to go there again. He is left with a scar which resembles vaginal lips. Sexual imagery recoded as a mark of pain. A fetish object that denies the lack of pleasure.
Maybe. This is definitely the least worst take out of them all. Though it is entirely underpinned when you find out from this reading of the film that the narrator isn't even real. So this whole journey with him going through the pain and trying to blot it out with images of pleasure doesn't quite work, because he's not real anyway.
Shortly afterwards, he denies Marla the sex that she's come to expect.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're done.
We see her again in the Paper Street house, but there's no sexual tension anymore. He has metaphorically closed his door to his pleasure center and has chosen to pursue pain.
Not quite. It's made obvious in the film that, according to Tyler, one of the main reasons that the narrator isn't going along with Project Mayhem properly is because of these feelings towards Marla. Because if you have an emotional connection to someone that you are going to inevitably hurt with Project Mayhem, then obviously you're not going to go through with Project Mayhem. So he needs to cut off that part of his life. He needs to cut off his feelings. And so that's actually what Tyler's trying to do there. But obviously you'd come up with this read if you don't think that the narrator is a real person.
If Fincher set out to tell a cautionary tale about the way we are so easily manipulated by media, celebrities, and people in positions of power, then he failed because his target audience, guys like us, clearly didn't get the message.
On the one hand, thank God it's nearly over. On the other hand, oh my god, what is your issue with understanding men and masculinity?
I mean, they went on to create actual fight clubs.
Yeah, the fight clubs weren't the issue. The fight clubs were actually quite helpful, believe it or not. The issue was that was their only outlet. The only outlet was what Tyler Durden was organising for them, and so obviously they're going to go down that rabbit hole. But a lot of people in reality would probably only go to the fight clubs and not go that much further. Though they'd understand the critique of modern consumerism that Fight Club was putting forward and do their best to try and fight it. You know, they'd probably live simpler lives, for example.
Or if he set out to make a movie that exploits that same bro-y audience, and he's laughing at everyone who enjoys it for being such gullible losers, then okay, good on you, I guess?
I think he just liked a book and wanted to adapt it to a film, dude.
Whatever the meaning may be to you or me or anyone else, Fight Club is unquestionably a powerful narrative. It's more than Fincher just using his commercial directing skills to sell us fascism. It's more than just a tale of insecure masculinity.
Yeah, I really don't think this film was trying to sell fascism. The whole point of the narrator's journey here is that he was missing something from his life. In trying to find that missing something, he did stupid things with Tyler, and eventually realised he either has to kill it off or integrate it, I think would be a better way to put it. He has to integrate this dangerous side. He has to realise it's there, and as soon as you realise it's there, you have to do what you can to try and integrate that to be part of society. And unfortunately, if you do that too late, well, you end up destroying the world.
I talked a lot about how narrow and controlled Tyler's point of view is in framing this story. There are very few moments where his narrative slips. Very few times where it feels like Fincher is commenting on Tyler, instead of Fincher simply having fun as the one controlling the story through Tyler.
Yeah, well, he didn't make the film as a propaganda piece, he made it as a piece of art. He specifically made the message ambiguous, because keeping an ambiguous message is better to get people talking about art than just making a propaganda piece where, say, The Last Jedi, it's just rich people bad, good versus evil bollocks. In this one, it's left ambiguous on purpose, because you get people like you who will get a completely different reading from the film, and yet still get some of the points in there. They'll have most of the takes be god-awful because of that, and then you get people like me who see the film, try and work out where the narrative's going with it, then work out the overarching theme and criticisms of, you know, life or modernity or whatever it will be. And then you get the people who just take it as, oh, we need fight clubs and to tear down the system. Though, to be honest, I don't know that many people who use Fight Club as a reason for blowing up a building. So that's why he's not commenting on it, really. It's because he wants to leave it ambiguous and he has respect for his audience.
Here's one example. In the first act, we see a woman with a shaved head in the background. She's there again when Chloe speaks, and these 2 seconds are the only time we really get a good look at her in focus. We may assume Chloe has a shaved head, but she keeps hers covered. In a movie where the vast majority of shots are distorted, highly motivated, emotionally jarring, this shot is quiet, matter of fact. Almost an hour and a half later, we see members of Project Mayhem shave their heads. By the end, Tyler has a shaved head. One woman's actual experience with cancer is these white guys' idea of a fun haircut.
Man, again, you're really reaching. I don't think anyone cares that this woman had a bald head in Project Mayhem. I think they were just having shaved heads because they were a militant group, and militant groups have shaved heads to be uniform. Part of Project Mayhem is that you lose your identity. Part of losing your identity is losing your hair. So well done, you just made a stupid comment again.
In appropriating this look, Tyler and his men attempt to appropriate a symbol of victimhood itself. He goes from appropriating the pain of being in a support group to appropriating the haircut of a woman with cancer. As if to say, look, my haircut shows that society is killing me. Society is committing a genocide against me. One might call it a white genocide.
Man, I can't even... You must have dislocated your shoulder reaching that much. Holy crap. How do you go through all this media theory stuff and then not understand basic things like a military haircut? And how do you keep referring to cancer patients' alopecia from the chemo as shaved heads? This is so moronic. I actually can't believe you shoehorned in the alt-right here.
As their actions escalate from pranks towards straight-up terrorism, they escalate from a simple appropriation of victimhood to the colonization of victimhood.
This isn't even parody. We got through 50 minutes of this, and it's just been parody all the way through, but this is the peak. Man, if you got an hour and 40 minutes through this, man, here you go. Here is my entertainment to you. This is incredible.
Their home base even resembles a work camp or concentration camp, as if to constantly remind Tyler's followers that they deserve to identify as oppressed. There's no frontier left to conquer. There's no more new world to pillage. So now we plunder hearts and minds. This colonization of victimhood allows Tyler and his men to justify pretty much anything, because now they can claim they have been wronged by simply pointing to this visual marker, the shaved head.
This is your mind on intersectionality, my dude. She got all this because what two women in the film had no hair because of chemotherapy they were going through, and then a military haircut happens to make you bald. Are you actually retarded? And also because the white man doesn't have anywhere more to pillage and colonise and plunder, as she puts it, which is a really, really awkward look on colonisation. It wasn't just there to plunder. In fact, it was rarely there to plunder. But now that the physical world has basically been exhausted on that front, apparently now we need to get hearts and minds of the victims of other white women. According to this film, anyway. What a stupid take.
Tyler is hell-bent on teaching young men that they have been disenfranchised, that their feelings are cancer, that love is death, and that ultimately your death in service of Tyler is freedom. And that's just sad more than anything else. Sad that we live in an age of technological miracles, yet despite that, a lot of the people who benefit most directly from society's advantages would rather spend their time tearing others down, pushing people out, stripping freedom from others, and dehumanizing them.
God, this is such a reach. There's more to the world than just pure materialism, more pure consumerism. It's a damn important thing, don't get me wrong, you can't live without material goods. But my God, when the highest suicide rates are among those of the people who apparently benefit most, as you say, from this world, then yeah, clearly something's missing in their lives.
Sad that the leader of the free world actually did come up with an alternate personality named John Barron, so that he could tell everyone how great he was in third person.
Over the years, I've used alias. If you're trying to buy land, you use different names.
What names
would you use? I actually used the name Barron.
Man, there were such better days when Trump was in charge. But really, you are reaching here. What has Trump tried to burn down like Project Mayhem? He was good for the economy. He helped materialism.
But also never shuts up about what a victim he is, how unfair everyone is to him.
But to say that, what you said, is so insulting to me. It's a very terrible thing that you said. That's such a racist question.
I mean, to be absolutely fair to Trump, he had some fair gripes with the media. They were out in force to get him. And yes, it was a racist question. If a white person says, yes, I am a nationalist, I believe in the nation state, and then people try and link it to saying, oh, well, he's saying he's a white nationalist, then yes, that is racism, I'm afraid. I sincerely wish you just own it.
Gavin McInnes, founder of the violent, racist Proud Boys.
Man, the Proud Boys were another. Loads of people in the Proud Boys were not white. Though I'm not going to sit here and pretend that one of the ways to get into the Proud Boys was to start a fight with Antifa. But to call them racist is just ridiculous, and Gavin McInnes, as far as I'm aware, just didn't do anything wrong.
A group with obvious inspiration from Fight Club.
Man, I wish you just made the video saying similarities between People I Don't Like and Fight Club, because that's all this video was leading up to. This is so much worse than the type of people who say Starship Troopers is a fascist analogy, just because some of the people wear SS-looking uniforms. It's honestly ridiculous.
Released a video saying that he's quitting the Proud Boys. He's trying to distance himself from the group after 9 of his followers were arrested for assault shortly following an appearance by McInnes himself at the Metropolitan Republican Club in New York City.
Of course, you're ignoring the part of that article title that mentioned that they were in a brawl with Antifa. Though, of course, they're absolutely nothing like, they're nothing like Fight Club. Now, Andy No hasn't done his investigative work and found out that they're doing a load of quote-unquote self-defense classes. Now, they don't go out and break Starbucks windows at all. Now, they don't go out and beat up reporters like Andy No when he's on the ground recording them. That doesn't happen at all.
I was never the leader, only the founder.
I know that I founded this group, but I did not lead this group.
Yeah, okay, I don't think Tyler ever makes that claim.
As we watch Gavin McInnes squirm, trying to distance himself from the violent hate group he founded, we see the cowardly selfishness of a paternalistic leader who is finally afraid he'll be held accountable.
I mean, again, what have they done that's hateful? I mean, violence, they do get in fights with Antifa, yeah, that's fine. I'm fine to call them violent. Though I probably would go as far to say that a lot of the time it's probably in self-defense, but I mean, this was 4 years ago, I don't really remember. And even the best things that Wikipedia's coming up with to try and say, oh, look at them, they're alt-right, is to mention that Richard Spencer was an editor of one of the magazines that mentioned them, and that they're overtly Islamophobic according to the ADL, and they're explicitly anti-communist and leftist. And apparently some people from one chapter of the Proud Boys marched with some people from Patriot Front. Like, I'm sorry, you just can't call the Proud Boys as a whole a hate group, because they're not. And either way, again, the ideology of Project Mayhem is nothing but anti-materialist. That's all they are.
His entire speech reads like a list of the rhetorical devices that we've been covering in this video. For the entire duration of this 36-minute video, even though he covers a variety of topics...
There was 37 minutes of this video and you couldn't even come up with one example where he sounded like Tyler Durden? Like, come on, no one's going to watch the 37-minute video. You have to give us the evidence there. You can't just make these claims and have your one bit of evidence be they got in a brawl with Antifa once.
McInnes stands next to a photo of one of the Proud Boys and his wife, who happens to be a person of color. He appropriates what he sees as the external symbol of her oppression, her skin color, and uses this image as a literal prop, as evidence that he, Gavin McInnes, is the one who is truly oppressed.
No, you idiot. He's trying to show that the Proud Boys aren't racist because some of their members are in mixed race relationships. How can you be racist if you marry someone of a different race? That doesn't make sense.
He has chosen this photo to disavow the fact that his gang targets marginalized groups, to disavow his obvious bigotry.
Oh boy, I hope you have some evidence for either of those claims. Of course you don't, 'cause you have no idea what you're talking about. For God's sake, this was 2018. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Enrique Tarrio the chair of the Proud Boys at that time. He was black. Well, not was black, still is black.
Her image is present, but any voice from those marginalized groups he targeted are absent.
Yeah, man, I don't think he felt the need, given that the leader of the Proud Boys at that time was a black guy.
In this age of information, we really do have front row seats in our theater of mass destruction thanks to the internet. There is so much news, so much data, so many points of view to sift through, and people in power use that to their advantage.
Yeah, man, I'm sure it's the people in power that push people to the Proud Boys.
Whereas the 20th century version of the monoform was linear video in the form of tightly packaged TV programming or movies, now we have Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, which fragment viewpoints and meaning even more.
Yeah, and the algorithm suppressed people like Gavin McInnes. He had to literally get off YouTube. He's on censored TV now. I mean, obviously it didn't happen at this point, but Donald Trump's been kicked off it all as well. Like, if you think the problem here was we have too much information in this society, if you think that was the point of Fight Club, you're a bigger idiot than I thought. But no, let's be honest, you just made this video for the last 10 minutes to bitch about Trump and Gavin McInnes.
I've been trying to figure out how I come to a conclusion in a video where I've specifically pointed out the dangers of driving towards a predetermined conclusion. And I think that conclusion is simply, we need to get better as a society at questioning narratives, questioning authority.
Man, that's specific. Are you seriously going to tell me that at this time when Trump was in the White House, he wasn't being scrutinised to death? I mean, look, it's 4 years later now. He's been off Twitter and off the presidency for 2 years. The man looks younger than ever. The man's nearly 80 years old and he looks about 50. But look, a thing you're missing is that people aren't going to question authority if they're just given things that they want or if they think they're being given the answers by them. This is why you went after Trump. But and I'm making a big assumption here, but I'd be very surprised if I'm wrong. But I bet you haven't gone after Biden in the same way in any other of your videos. I bet you just try and stick to the media there.
Stop just asking why and start asking who is benefiting from this story.
9 times out of 10, it's the media themselves, plus the institutions that run them, along with universities, especially over in America.
And the answer in Fight Club is only one person benefits. Tyler.
Moronic take. A lot of people in Project Mayhem were perfectly happy with their lives being part of Project Mayhem. And again, we had no idea what Tyler's plan was for after the collapse of civilization. There was no indication of what would happen. The whole point was that he just wanted anarchy, because according to the narrator's mind, that is exactly where you need to go to unlock and reach those deep masculine urges for violence, for status, for anything like that, because materialism wasn't cutting it. So there you go, nearly 2 hours long. This has been a busy afternoon, but I just had to go through that video. It's one of the worst videos I've seen in my life. And given there's basically nothing else in the news, I think that was time well spent. So those of you that made it to the end of this, very well done. I think this is actually the longest video on my channel now. And that's everything I've got for you today. So well done for making it to the end. And as usual, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, goodbye.